Hello guys, this is Dark Fox Sage 2 and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto's Life Changed Near the Stream Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. A familiar day. The sun was shining brightly through a window and onto the bed of a sleeping figure. The figure turned a bit, going under the covers to escape the sun. The sun seemed to shine brighter as the figure growled slightly. Golden hair popped up from under the sheets, while the figure looked at the alarm clock. 7:45. The figure had slept in late, but that's all right. As long as she didn't find out, it would be all right. As long as she doesn't know, the figure thought, as the person went back to sleep. A second later, Naruto, get up, screamed someone as a person kicked his door down. Crap, Naruto thought as his eyes looked over the covers to see person. It was a woman in her late 20s. She wore a fishnet shirt, shorts, and a thin white coat. She was around 5 feet 9 and had raven black hair. She seemed hyper for her age and was a little weird to most, especially the whole tasting blood thing, but Naruto was able to put up with her. Not like he had a choice to begin with. 5 more minutes, Mom, Naruto said, as he turned to the left. The women looked at Naruto and smiled evilly. She quickly formed some seals as she whispered something. A few seconds later, a large collection of water from the air gathered over his head. She smiled, as she let go of her hold on the water and let it fall onto the boy. The women watched as Naruto shot out of the bed and onto the floor. Naruto glared at the women, as she laughed her ass off. Sorry Naruto-kun, but you're getting out of bed one way or another. The women said as she stopped laughing and smiled warmly at the 7-year-old. Now get dressed already and come downstairs. The women said, turning her back to him and walking away, leaving a very pissed Naruto. After a couple of minutes, Naruto came down the stairs fully dressed in an orange jumpsuit. He looked around to see his mother standing next to the microwave. She looked up at him from the microwave. About time, go sit down, breakfast is ready, she stated as the microwave went off. Naruto's face went into a wide grin, as he quickly ran towards the table and sat down, while his mother brought out of the microwave 2 instant cups. As soon as the women handed Naruto the cup, ramen was splattered all over the walls, as he ate ferociously at it. All the women could do was watch Naruto eat. You should really have more manners, the women stated as she watched Naruto stop and look at her in a confused way. Coming from you, Naruto asked. Good point. Soon the walls was soon covered with more ramen, as they devoured their meal. As soon as both were done, they cleaned the place up and were out the door. Be careful today, Naruto-kun, the women said, as she bent down kissed Naruto on the forehead. He looked at her and smiled. I will, Mom, see ya later, he yelled, as he dashed off into the village. The women smiled sadly at the boy before sighing. Yo, Anko-chan, yelled a voice, as Anko turned towards the voice. Hello, Tsunade-sama, she greeted her, as Tsunade walked over to Anko. How are you today, Anko? Tsunade asked. Fine, and you? Fine, Tsunade answered in a cheerful voice. How's your daughter? She's well, replied Tsunade. Shuzin official became a Junin yesterday and left to go on her first mission this morning, she said in a cheerful voice. They grow up so fast. And you're sad about this? Asked Anko in a confused voice. Fuck no. The sooner she grows up, the sooner it's just me and Jiraiya, Tsunade replied, while smiling in an unusual Jiraiya-like way. Anko just laughed a bit before looking in Naruto's direction. Tsunade's face instantly hardened. There was another attack, huh? 2 Junin and 1 Anbu. Naruto went to bed before it started, this time, so he doesn't know, replied Anko, as her face dropped into a frown. You could have asked me and Jiraiya to help you fight them off, replied Tsunade, in a stern voice. It was 1 a.m. in the morning, I didn't want to disrupt you guys, especially if you were in the middle of something. Anko replied, as she watched Tsunade huff before remembering where she had to be. If you please excuse me, Tsunade, I have to report for a mission. Could you watch over Naruto for me? Anko asked, as she looked at Tsunade hopefully. Tsunade thought for a moment before sighing. How long? It's a long-term mission. It would only be for a few months, please. Anko asked, as she put her hands together. Fine, I'll watch over him. Tsunade replied, as she watched Anko sigh in relief and begin on her way. She looked over her shoulder while was walking at Tsunade. Thanks, Tsunade. I'm off to taste blood. Later, yelled Anko, as she continued on her way and hummed something about slaughtering things. Tsunade watched her in disbelief. God, I hope Naruto doesn't end up like that. Tsunade thought, as she went on her way down the road back to her house. Naruto was running happily down the streets of Konoha, keeping his head high and smiling like an idiot. He didn't have anything else to do. Naruto was too young for the academy and no daycare or babysitter would accept him, so he just ran around all day. He knew no one his age, since whenever he tried to talk to a child, the parent usually took them away. Some would even beat Naruto if he spoke to their child, so he usually avoided any and all children, and that's how the villagers liked it. Speaking of which, Naruto was still running around the road, with the biggest smile on his face. He ran by villagers on the road as he headed in no particular direction. Everyone he passed had a look of anger on their faces. The demon brat is happy, disgusting. He took our families yet we can't touch him. If it weren't for that bitch you'd be dead by now. Of course Naruto never noticed them, caught up in his own little world full of ramen and monkeys. Why monkeys, you ask? When the Sandaime first met Naruto at the age of 3, he found him crying in the forest during one of his walks. After being told about how the villagers rejected him and having no friends, the third came up with an idea. He gathered chakra and summoned a very large ape with white fur. Due to a request by the Hokage and a little befriending of Naruto, the ape, which the third referred to as the King of Apes, reluctantly gave Naruto a small seal on his left shoulder blade. Later, after the ape had left, the third explained to Naruto that it would allow him to summon the ape or any of his friends. Naruto was 3, that's the only way he could understand it when he was strong enough. It was a good thing it was on his left shoulder blade, so that no one could see it. If anyone found out that Naruto, of all people, received this generation's ape contract, all hell would break loose. Back to Naruto, he was currently walking cautiously through this part of town. Every time he passed by a large mansion that was on this same path, he would always be chased by weird people with really weird eyes. He saw the complex, which he feared greatly, wondering whether to find another path to walk on or just move ahead. Being Naruto, he gathered his courage and was about to walk past the mansion, when he heard a loud scream. Naruto snapped his head in the direction of the voice only to be knocked down by a white blur. The hell? Naruto said, as he felt dizzy for a moment until he shook it off and looked down at what hit him. It was a girl, around his age, maybe a year less. She had short black hair, a white coat, and some brown pants. She seemed to be out cold. Naruto looked in the direction of where the girl came from to see a boy that looked older than him. He wore the same clothing as the girl, only he wore bandages on his forehead and his hair was longer. The boy looked over at them and huffed before walking away, leaving a very confused Naruto. He looked down at the girl who was still panicking. Oh crap, what the hell am I supposed to do with her? Naruto thought, as he sighed. I can't leave her here, so I'll just take her with me. Naruto then proceeded to position her on his back and began running towards the nearest stream. When Naruto finally reached the stream, he quickly, but gently, laid the girl on the ground. He took of his jacket, folded it up, and placed it under her head. Naruto felt her forehead before he pulled out a handkerchief and ran towards the stream. After it was wet, he quickly ran back to the girl and placed it on her forehead. For once, Something mom taught me was useful. Naruto thought as he stared down at the girl's sleeping form. Now all I have to do is wait for her to wake up, scream demon brat, and report me to the proper authorities. Naruto said, as he sighed while sitting on a close-by log. This is going to be a looning day. She shifted a bit in her sleep, turning left and right, sweating a bit as well. She gasped for breath, feel pain rushing through her body. She felt heartbroken at what he said, of all people to say it to. Remembering was enough to cause her suffering. You cannot fight against your fate. You are in the field of my division. You're weak, Hinata-sama. Just die already. Hinata's eyes bursted open full of tears, as she quickly sat up and looked around frantically trying to determine where she was. Hinata felt something fall off her forehead as she saw a handkerchief fall to her lap. She picked it up and examined it. Hinata placed one of her hands on her forehead to find out she was running a slight fever. She looked behind her to see a jacket which looked like it had been folded beforehand. After taking the next few seconds to let this sink in, she finally noticed something that sounded like snoring. She turned her head in the direction of the noise to see a boy around a year older than her sleeping, while sitting straight up, on a log. He wore a white shirt, orange pants, and sandals. He had golden hair and what looked like whisker marks on his cheek. Hinata noticed him stir as he opened his eyes. The first thing he seemed to notice was Hinata staring at him. His face started to form into a smile. You're all right. Yeesss. He yelled, as he jumped around. Hinata looked at him with a confused-looking expression. She watched him, as she tried to stand up, almost accomplishing it until she started to fall backwards, closing her eyes waiting to hit the ground. When it never came, Hinata opened her eyes to look up at the boy from before. Then again, maybe not. By the way, I'm Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto said as he smiled at her, while carefully laying the girl back down. Hinata was blushing red the whole time. Nice to meet you. I'm Hyuga Hinata. Hinata replied, as she continued to blush and look up at Naruto. So tell me, Hinata-chan, why did you do to piss of that guy with weird eyes and long hair? Naruto asked, as he stared down at her waiting for an answer. Neji-sama, he was helping me ttrain, replied Hinata, looking downward remembering his word. Fresh tears formed in her eyes, as she cried a bit. Oh shit, she's crying, what am I supposed to do now? Naruto thought, as he watched her cry. Hinata-chan, why are you crying? Asked Naruto, while Hinata looked upwards. Neji said I was weak, and had is hold d die. Hinata said, as she continued to cry. Does he have a stick shoved up his ass? Hearing this, Hinata abruptly stopped. What? I said does he have a stick shoved up his ass? Naruto said in a higher voice. Hinata just stared at him blankly, as Naruto sighed. Look, Hinata-chan, you're not weak. Hinata was shocked to hear this. But Neji said. Have you given up yet? Naruto asked, cutting Hinata off. Hinata thought for a moment. No. Then you're not weak. Mom says only the weak give up. As long as you remember that nothing stands in your way. Naruto stated as he stood up and pumped his fist into the air while grinning at Hinata. As soon as she saw this, she stopped crying and looked up at Naruto with a smile. They stayed like this for a couple off moments, until. Grow wwwllll. Naruto looked down at his stomach for a moment before blushing. Hinata-chan, would you like to go get something to eat? He asked politely. Hinata was surprised by this, but nevertheless. I would love to end Naruto-kun. The sun was a golden yellow, as it was setting. While Naruto was running back to his house only to remember he was supposed to go to Tsunade's house today. He quickly sprinted off in the direction of her house. He was running at full speed down the road, as people started to take notice. Soon enough Naruto was standing in front of 4 very pissed adults. What are you doing here, brat? One asked in an angered voice. To see Oba-chan. Naruto yelled, in a very high voice and a smile. Demons aren't allowed on this road. Another shouted at Naruto. I'm not a demon, I'm me. Naruto replied, cheerfully. Of course, after a few minutes of Naruto never breaking his smile to their insults pretty much pissed them all off to a new level. Until finally they snapped and attacked Naruto. Some had sticks, some people threw stones, and one had a kunai. Since Naruto was only 7 and was being constantly beat with hard sticks and stones plus one kunai, this caused him to cry continuously, as he begged them to stop. Of course this was music to their ears. Please, Naruto said weakly, as someone stabbed him in the shoulder backside. Shut up. You took our family's lives, so we're taking yours. The man got behind Naruto and kicked him down, his back showing. The man ripped the kunai from Naruto's back, causing him to cry in pain. He was about to strike Naruto down when all the people heard a cough. Is there something I should know about? Tsunade asked, as she leaked killer intent and clenched her fist. When the people saw this, they quickly rushed to their homes, in hope they would not piss her off any more than she already is. Tsunade sighed, as she walked towards Naruto and picked him up with the slightest of ease. He has many bruises and cuts, and judging by the way he leaked blood, stabbed a couple times. Naruto just looked up at her with a grin, as she continued to carry him back to her house. Hello, Oba-chan. Want to hear about my day? Hello Naruto-kun, and know you need to save your strength, besides nothing's new happens on your days. Quote. But, Oba-chan, something new did happen today. Oh. What? Quote. I made a friend. Naruto replied, biting his grin, as Tsunade looked in shock at Naruto. What to hear about it now? He asked, hopefully. Maybe later, Naruto-kun. A youthful greeting. Several weeks had passed since Naruto and Hinata met. They usually would meet in assigned locations like the forest or the Ichiraku ramen stand. They tried to meet at the park once. They noticed a kid with black hair and sunglasses and tried to talk to him. That was until the parents saw Naruto and chased him off while screaming threats at him. Naruto even showed Hinata the seal on his left shoulder. Currently Naruto was running through the forest to another meeting. The reason they chose forest this time was because the villagers were getting a little restless with having Naruto around so much, since he usually either stayed inside his house or in the forest all day, except when he went to Ichiraku's. When he finally reached the location, Naruto saw Hinata sitting by the river. An idea slowly formed in Naruto's mind as a grin grew on his face. I hope Naruto-kun can make it today, thought Hinata, as her face showed a worried expression. There had been a couple of times when Naruto wasn't able to meet with her, due to the villagers. She had even come across one time when she had witnessed some of the villagers beating him. She would have fought them off due to her family training. She was already at genin level, and the villagers were civilians, if Naruto hadn't looked at her and shook his head slightly, mouthing the words. Don't interfere. All Hinata could do was watch from the shadows, as he dragged himself out of the village. When they meet at the stream a little later, she asked him why he wouldn't had let her help. He just smiled at her. Sorry Hinata-chan, this is one thing I have to do on my own. Besides, they may hit you as well. Hinata sighed, as she continued to wait. She started to have a strange feeling like something was going to happen, but shook it off. She slowly stood up and brushed herself off, a second later disappearing in a puff of smoke, as Naruto now stood in Hinata's place being hit by his own chakra-made water balloon. See chapter 1 for details. No fair hitting me with my own balloon. Naruto yelled, as he pointed to the section of the forest that Hinata was walking out from. Sorry Naruto-kun, but it's free for all, replied Hinata, while she formed a water balloon and threw it at Naruto. Soon the entire area became like a battlefield, as they went at it with chakra-made water balloons. After a couple of minutes of throwing balloons, they decided to rest in one of the trees, Hinata was sitting on one branch and Naruto was lying on a branch a little higher up. There was a comfortable silence between the two, until Hinata decided to speak up. Naruto-kun. Why do all the V villagers hate you? She asked as she looked up at Naruto. He thought for a moment before shrugging. I don't know, they just always have. But there has to be a reason why they call you demon b brat. 10 to 1, they probably have a reason for it. I'm not saying it's a good reason, but a reason nevertheless. Still Naruto-kun. Hinata was cut off as they heard a loud noise and saw a large dust cloud burst up from the ground about a mile away. They were in a tree, remember? Naruto and Hinata glanced at each other, before jumping out of the tree and running towards the source of the noisy. They slowed down their pace as they reached a clearing full of smoke. When it finally cleared, they saw a big crater with a boy standing in the middle jumping up and down, while what looked like, crying. I've done it, Guy-sensei. I've finally done it. The burning youth is in me, yelled the boy as he continued to jump up and down. The boy stopped for a moment, before looking in Naruto's and Hinata's direction. I know you're there, show yourselves. Both were shocked that the boy noticed them. Naruto sighed as he grabbed Hinata's hand, of course causing her to blush, and walked out to meet the boy. The boy looked strange. He had short black hair and thick eyebrows. He wore a green suit and bandages around his hands. About halfway to the boy, Naruto let go of Hinata's hand and continued on his own. We're sorry, we were just interested in what made that noise. Naruto said, as the boy's face instantly lit up. That was just my spurt of youth. I am Rock Lee. The boy said, as he posed, causing Naruto and Hinata to sweat drop. It's nice to meet you. I am Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto then pointed towards Hinata. And this is Hyuga Hinata. Lee nodded. The spurt of youth is burning within you. Allow me to accompany you today, as we show our burning passion. Naruto looked over at Hinata, who had a confused expression on her face, before turning back to Lee and shrugging. Sure. Why not? Just try to keep the volume down. They had been walking around aimlessly for several hours now. Naruto had to repeatedly calm Lee down as he yelled about the spurt of youth. He was a nice guy and treated Naruto with respect, even if it was in his own way of showing it. Spurt of youth yells, jumping up and down, challenging Naruto, etc. They were pretty much bored the entire time, and Lee's, however a nice guy he may be, yells were not making things any better. All of Konoha shall bear witness to our flames of youth. Our passion. Our spurt. Our. Lee's mouth was covered by Naruto's hat as he still went on about flaming youth. Lee, shut up, Naruto said, as he watched Lee try to tell him something, but couldn't make out what it was. I'm sorry, did you say something? Asked Naruto, removing his hand. I said, you cannot silence our flaming youth. For it shows our passion. Our spurts. Our. Lee was cut off yet again, thank God, by a noise coming from around the corner. The three looked at each other, before slowly walking up towards the corner. When they got there, they saw a little girl crying with a man in white robes standing next to her. And then when asked the boy with sunglasses and spiky hair to play with me, he said he couldn't, because he had to look for something. When I asked him if I could help, he said no and left me all alone. The girl cried a little more, as the man adopted a thinking position. A few seconds later his face lit up, as he formed a few seals. He closed his hand and, what looked like, blew on his hands. He signaled for the girl to come closer, as he lowered his hand downward towards the girl. When his hand was in front of her face, he opened it to reveal a few very small golden butterflies. What else would come out? The girl's face instantly lit up, as she watched the butterflies until they finally disappeared. Feel better? Asked the man, as the girl nodded a bit. Would you like me to teach you how to do it? The girl nodded her head vigorously. Meet me here tomorrow evening and all. The girl smiled and nodded once, running off towards the park, but not before turning back to the man and waving. Bye Hokage-sama. The Hokage smiled and waved back. Bye Sakura-chan. When the girl finally left, the Hokage's face hardened. You know it's not nice to spy on people, Naruto. The Hokage's face dropped into a smile, as Naruto stepped out from behind the corner and rubbed the back side of his head, while a nervous smile plastered itself on Naruto's face. Crap. How does everyone keep noticing me? Sorry Ouija-san, but we were just wondering who was crying. The Hokage nodded before looking over at the corner. Who are your friends Naruto-kun? At this point Naruto's face was beaming. He signaled them to come, as Lee pretty much dragged Hinata over to meet the Hokage. Naruto smiled a bit. Ouija-san, this is Hyuga Hinata. He said, as he pointed towards Hinata, who was pushing her fingers together and looking at the ground. And this is Rock Lee. He said, as he pointed towards Lee, who pumped his fist in the air and for some reason looked like he had fire going in his eyes. Guys, this is Ouija-san. Naruto said, as he pointed towards the Hokage, who was smoking his pipe. He-yo Hokage-sama. Hinata said, still pushing her fingers together. It's an honor to meet you Hokage-sama, such a person who is full of such majestic youth. The spurt of youth shines with a burning passion. Lee's mouth was yet again covered by Naruto's hand, as he sighed. Sorry Ouija-san, he can get carried away at times. Naruto said, as he looked over at Lee who was still talking about youth. The Hokage laughed at this. It's okay Naruto, by the way, could I speak with you privately for a moment? Asked the Hokage, as Naruto nodded. He then turned around to face Hinata. Watch him. Hinata nodded, as she listened to Lee go on and on about youth, while Naruto and the Hokage walked towards an alleyway. Once the third made sure no one was watching, his face hardened again. Naruto, the number of reports about the murder attempts and beatings you have received from the villagers have increased lately. Did you, by chance, show anyone or let anyone see your gift by accident? The Hokage asked, as he watched Naruto, waiting for an answer. The only person that has seen it was Hinata, and I already made her promise to not tell anyone. Naruto replied. The Hokage did not look pleased with the answer he was given. Seriously Naruto, if anyone finds out you have that summoning seal, there would be an uproar, I wouldn't even be able to help you. I don't understand what's so special about this particular summoning. I mean they shouldn't be afraid, since I can't even use it. Naruto said, as frustration started to form inside of him. The Hokage sighed and bent down to Naruto's height. Naruto, they're afraid of what will happen when you do use it. What do you mean? Asked Naruto, as his face formed a confused expression. It's nothing, just promise me that you won't tell anyone else. Naruto thought for a moment. Fine. He said, as the Hokage smiled. Good. Now go play with your friends. Naruto did a salute before running off to save Hinata from her fate. A frown formed on the third's face. I can only hope to be there for him when the real reason behind the summoning seal is revealed. At least he made some friends, but who would have thought they would be the Hyuga heir and Guy's student? After saving Hinata from having to listen to Lee rant on about the spurt of youth, they all continued to wander aimlessly around the town. Both Hinata and Lee noticed the glares that Naruto were receiving from the villagers, but since he acted like he never received any at all, they just kept quiet about it. Soon they were forced to separate due to how late it was getting, Hinata having to return home and Lee needing to do some late-night training. Naruto left for Tsunade's house, since his mother was not back from her mission yet. Naruto was surprised to say the least when he managed to make it to Tsunade's house without receiving a beating from the villagers. Weird, thought Naruto, as he walked up towards the door of Tsunade's house. They would have at least thrown stones by now. He turned the knob. As he walked inside, it was a decent two-story house, nothing all that special about it. All the essentials were in the house and 2 guest rooms. Actually 1 guest room and his room, it might as well be his room since he stayed at Tsunade's house most of the time. Yo, I'm home, he yelled, as he walked into the living room, to see Shizune on the couch. Shizune looked up from her book and smiled at Naruto. Hello Naruto-kun. Naruto looked at her with his famous grin. Hello Shizune-chan. He then proceeded to run towards the couch, jumped, and land next to Shizune. I give it a 8.5 inches. Damn. Naruto replied, as he pouted a bit. So how was your day Naruto-kun? Shizune asked, while closing her book and putting it on a nearby table. Naruto's face broke into another grin. I managed to make another friend today. Oh, really? This had really caught her attention now. Yeah, he said his name was Lee. It's possible, thought Shizune, as she continued to listen to Naruto. And he kept going on and on about the spurt of youth. Yep, defiantly guy's student. Shizune thought, as she sweat dropped. For the rest of the day, Shizune listened to Naruto, while he told her about what had happened and how he was excited for having two friends. Soon it was time to go to bed. Naruto went to sleep with a smile plastered on his face. A unique family. Time seemed to fly for Naruto, as a few months had gone by. His mother finally came back from her mission with few injuries. As soon as she could, she gathered as much info as possible about what happened in the last few months. The villagers had a tendency to assault Naruto when she left on a mission, and the villagers had happened to accidentally find out she was gone, while taking full advantage of it. She was shocked when Naruto told her that he had made friends. The three themselves were getting closer each day, even with the villagers and all. Anko wanted to meet them in person and told Naruto to bring them over for dinner. Naruto thought about this for a moment before nodding his head and running out the door. Naruto was as happy as ever. Even with the village's attempts to separate the three, they still managed to meet every day. He was currently running through the forest toward their usual location near the stream. The villagers were getting more aggressive each week. Hell, they even had manhunts, patrolling the village, making sure Naruto doesn't enter it. Back to Naruto. He had finally reached the stream when he heard several noises coming from nearby. He listened closely before heading in the direction of a clearing. When he arrived, he was amazed at what he saw. A boy around Naruto's age was standing in the middle of a swarm of bugs that were spinning around him in a hurricane type of way. The boy wore a high-collar jacket, black pants, and sandals. He had black spiky hair and sunglasses as well. The boy slowly raised his hands upward, as the swarm of bugs flew towards the sky. A second later, flying down the boy's sleeve, the swarm slowly disappearing. The hell? Naruto thought, while he made his way towards the boy. How did you do that? Naruto asked, as the boy finally took notice of him. They live inside me. The boy said, with no emotion in his voice. What? The bugs, they live inside me. The boy raised his hand as a bug broke through the skin and crawled around his hand. Now that he knows, he'll run away, like the rest. Thought the boy, as he watched Naruto's next move. Bugs. Naruto stuttered, as he looked up and down the boy, not believing his ears. The boy simply nodded in confirmation. A second later, kick ass, Naruto yelled, as he ran up towards the boy and chanted, "Teach me," over and over again. The boy was in shock at what had just happened. Hell, even with the high collar, you could see the confused look on his face. Wah, I said, teach me how to control bugs. Naruto said, while putting his hands together and making puppy dog eyes. Please. Only people in my family can use it, stated the boy, as he watched Naruto's face drop into a frown. Ah, damn it. Naruto kicked a rock into the stream. What family are you from anyway? My name is Aburame Shino. Shino said, as he watched Naruto think for a moment, before grinning like a idiot. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. It's nice to meet you. Shino said in a emotionless voice. Hey Shino, would you like to come over to my house for dinner? Why? Because mom said to bring all my friends over for dinner. Naruto stated, as he watched Shino think it over. So are you coming or not? A lot of things were going through Shino's mind at this point. I know father would never approve of this, I don't even know him. But still. Sure. Elsewhere, Hinata and Lee were busy walking down the streets of Konoha in search of Naruto. Naruto had told them to meet in the village, but left into much of a hurry to tell them where to meet in the village. So naturally they were walking aimlessly around the village, hoping to find Naruto. Or at least Hinata was. Lee had somehow thought that his youthful passion would lead him straight to Naruto. Hinata stayed quiet most of the time, as Lee marched proudly in front. Lee-kun, are you sure we're heading in the right direction? Asked Hinata even though she knew full well what the answer would be. Of course Hinata-chan, my youthful spurt shall guide us to Naruto-kun. Lee then did his nice guy pose, which caused Hinata to sweat drop. But didn't Naruto-kun tell us to meet in the forest? Hi, he did, but my youthful spurt tells me that he's in the village. So let us be off. Lee then broke into a light sprint, while Hinata's sweat drop grew in size, before she ran off after him. An hour later, Hinata hit the ground, landing on all fours, trying to breath. Lee was jogging in place beside her. They had gone through half of Konoha looking for Naruto and still hadn't managed to find him. Come Hinata-chan, we must find Naruto-kun. Only then will our youthful spurts be complete. Lee then decided continue jogging, or would have at least if two figures hadn't jumped down from the rooftops. Lee and Hinata immediately took battle stances. It didn't matter if Hinata was tired or not. If they had to fight, they had to fight. Soon dropping their stances when they finally realized who it was. Naruto was standing before them while posing, while a boy with spiky black hair and sunglasses stood behind Naruto. A few seconds passed before Naruto dropped his pose and glared at the boy. I thought I told you to pose when we jumped out. Naruto said, as the boy looked at Naruto, unfazed by his words. What was your reason for posing again? Asked the boy. To make us look kick-ass. Naruto said, while giving the victory sign. The boy just stared at Naruto, never flinching. Hinata's sweat dropped as Lee was, well, being Lee. Naruto, your youthful spurt is burning with a great passion. You shall forever be my eternal rival. Lee did his own pose, as a sweat drop formed on the boy's head and the sweat drop on Hinata's head grew larger. Hinata then slowly walked, she's still tired, over towards the boy. Hello, I am Hyuga Hinata. Hinata said, as the boy finally noticed her. I am Aburame Shino. Shino then turned his attention towards Lee. Who is the one in green? Hinata looked over at Lee, who was now engaged in a posing contest with Naruto. That is Lee-kun. Shino turned his attention towards Hinata. It's a. Shino glanced at Lee for a moment. Pleasure to meet you. Shino then turned towards Naruto. Naruto, didn't you something about us being late? Naruto turned to Shino with a confused expression, before finally remembering. Crap, we need to go now. Or else mom is seriously going to be pissed. What do you mean Naruto-kun? What I mean is, you guys are invited over for dinner. Mom says that she wants to meet you guys. Naruto stated. So, do you want to come? Both Lee and Hinata thought for a moment, taking in what Naruto had just said. Hi Naruto-kun, I will meet the mother of the child with such a burning youthful spurt. Lee said, as Naruto looked over at Hinata. Well, Hinata thought about her options, before looking at Naruto. Would love to end Naruto-kun. Great. Let's go. Naruto, Lee, and Shino proceeded to run off, leaving Hinata in their dust. She tried to keep up, but was still worn out from running around Kohono with Lee. After a few minutes of running, she collapsed to the ground on all four, panting deeply. When the guys noticed this, they all stopped, as Naruto ran up to Hinata. "You okay?" Naruto asked, as he watched her take in deep breaths. "I'm fine and Naruto-kun. Just a little tired," Hinata said, while focusing on trying to control her breathing. Naruto frowned. "Crap. We're already late as it is." Naruto thought about it before coming up with an idea. That would work. Naruto then proceeded to turn his back to Hinata and get on one knee. Hinata looked confusedly at Naruto, as he looked over his shoulder. "Get on. What? I said get on, Hinata-chan. You're tired and I'm not going to push you, but we really need to get to my house," stated Naruto. Hinata would have protested, if not for Naruto's smile. At that point, it really didn't seem to matter. She slowly got up and walked towards Naruto. She wrapped her arms around his neck, as he placed his hands just above her knees. "Ready?" Naruto asked, as he watched a now blushing Hinata nod. "About damn time too. We're off." Naruto then began to run towards his house with Shino and Lee following in hot pursuit. The whole time to Naruto's house, Hinata could only think one thing as she laid her head on his back. "This feels nice. Where the hell is he?" screamed Anko, as she sighed in frustration. She had prepared dinner half an hour ago and it was getting cold. The other quests were trying to eat their food, but Anko would send them a death glare, stopping them instantly. Well, only the guys, the women had enough patience to wait for Naruto and his friends. Quote. "So Anko-chan, when do you think Naruto-kun will arrive?" asked a silver-headed man, trying to avoid Anko's latest death glare. "Soon enough," replied Anko, as she continued to glare. "I wish Naruto would hurry up already," whined a white-haired man. "And what exactly is that supposed to mean?" asked one of the females. "He's just saying that all this food is going to waste," replied a black-haired man, as he stood up. "Now if you excuse me, I'll going to the bathroom. Oh well, at least I can catch up on my reading." The silver-haired man, while giggling and pulling out a orange-colored book. The female from before sighed. "Honestly, are the only things that men ever think about, food and sex." She looked over at the silver and white-haired man. They glanced at each other, before turning their attention towards her. "Yes. Figures. Mom, I'm home," yelled a voice, as they heard the door slam and watched Naruto walk into the room, with 3 children behind him. His face instantly lit up as soon as he noticed who was in the room. Uncle Kakashi. Aunt Rin. Arrow Ouija-san. Naruto was cut off when he was smacked upside the head. "OWWW. What the fuck was that for? I told you to stop calling me that," yelled the man, as he took notice of the small group. "So these are your friends, Naruto?" Naruto's face lit up again. "Hi. That's Hinata-chan," Naruto said, pointing towards Hinata, who gave a slight bow. "That's Lee-kun," Naruto said, pointing towards Lee, who pumped his fist into the air. "And that's Shino-san," Naruto said, as he pointed towards Shino, who just nodded. "It's nice to meet you," stated Rin, as she jabbed Kakashi in the ribs, getting his attention from his favorite book. "Yes, it's very nice," he replied, as he went back to reading his book. Rin just glared at him, wondering on how many ways she could destroy his book later. "Wow, this has to be the most enthusiastic meeting I've ever seen," stated a black-haired man, as he walked into the living room. "Hello, Uncle Iruka," replied Naruto, as he turned around to face him. "Don't you have to work today?" "Yep. But I took the day off to see you and meet your friends. That and to eat your mother's cooking. Which reminds me," the guys looked at Anko hopefully. "Yes, we can eat now." The white-haired man put on a grin, as ran into the dining room. The female Junin ran ahead of him and put a kunai to his throat. "Not before the children, Jiraiya," Anko stated, glaring at him. 10 to 1 if he wasn't a Sanin, he probably would have pissed his pants by now. So they spent the last hour eating and talking to one another. Hinata, Lee, and Shino got to know Naruto's family quite a bit. Like, for instance, to never piss off Anko or how Kakashi seemed to like reading a certain book. When they asked what kind of book it was, Rin turned red before telling them that it wasn't for kids and that they shouldn't worry about it. After dinner, Naruto and the others decided to spar, but since Naruto was the only one out of the four who had no previous training, it wasn't long before he lost. While the four children were resting in the living room with the other adults, they heard a knock at the door. Anko left to answer it, only to be shocked at who it was. Hiyashi-sama, one of my subordinates told me Hinata was here, is that true? He asked, in a somewhat concerned, but emotionless voice. Hi, she is, but Hinata needs to return to the Hyuga mansion, she has training in the morning. Hiyashi-than invited himself in and went into the living room, Anko following closely behind. When Hiyashi entered the room, he ignored all the shocked faces from the Junin and looked directly at Hinata. Hinata, it's time to go. Father, Hinata said, in a confused tone of voice. Naruto glanced between the two, before getting up off his chair and running towards Hiyashi. Are you really Hinata-chan's father? He asked. Hi, who are you? Was Hiyashi's answer, as Naruto grinned. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, remember it? Naruto stated, as Hiyashi's eyes widened in surprise. The demon, Hiyashi thought, as he looked at Naruto again. It's nice to meet you Naruto, but Hinata and I must be on our way. He watched, as Hinata hopped off the couch. She glanced at Naruto who only smiled at her and waved her goodbye. A small glint appeared in her eyes when she looked at his smile and gave a small one of her own. This did not go unnoticed by Hiyashi. They soon left the Uzumaki house at around 7 p.m. and were on their way. The stars were shining brightly above them, as they walked down the path towards the Hyuga mansion. Hiyashi and Hinata had stayed quiet, as they walked side by side. Hiyashi was thinking about Hinata's relationship with the Kyuubi container the entire time. He was supposed to be the thing that could take on 300 Konoha shinobi and kill them all in one strike, the destroyer of half of Konoha and almost half its population, and basically should have been killed off as soon as possible, but still that smile. Hiyashi looked over towards Hinata, who was currently having her own thoughts about Naruto. Hinata looked calm on the outside, but in reality was panicking on a whole new level. What's going to happen now that father knows about Naruto-kun? Is he going to be like the other villagers and try to hurt him or keep him away from me? I don't know what would happen. I couldn't see Naruto-kun again. Hinata would have shed tears if she was not in the presence of her father. She continued on thinking like this until her father spoke up. Hinata, he said, get Hinata's full attention. Why yes father? She asked. That child, Naruto. Is special to you, isn't he? Asked Hiyashi, as he looked down at Hinata, who stopped walking at her father's question and thought about it. He had helped her in more ways than basically sum everything up. Hinata was broken. No one in her family really took it open themselves to help her, only to put her down. She only lived to make her father and sister proud, having already given up on her mother. Never once was she truly happy with this life. When Naruto came, everything changed. He made her laugh, confident, somewhat full of energy. There were times when he would help her train, times when he held her while she cried, though with a bored expression, caring mind you, but bored, and times where he was just being himself, which was more than she could ever ask from him. He was always there for her, no matter what. Without being around him, with him, watching him. She truly couldn't do one thing without him, and that was smile. Hi. Hiyashi sighed inwardly. How was he going to explain this to his wife? Somewhere in the Hokage's tower, Sortobi had just finished writing in a large scroll. There, now we have something to fall back on. The villagers have seriously become more aggressive lately and I don't know when they finally will strike, but at least we have some hope now. Sooner or later they are going to find out about the seal and hopefully I'll be able to save him, unlike how I was unable to save his father. The third got up from his chair in the library and walked towards a nearby window. He glanced out over Kohona as he smoked his pipe. Naruto, I'm sorry that you had to carry such a burden, but when the time comes, please, forgive them. He then left the room, trapped in his thoughts, thinking on what was to come for Naruto and his family. The beginning of the end. 1 year, one long year since Naruto and Hinata had met. The best year in his life too. Naruto was now 8 years old and loving every minute of it. His mother had given him a little more freedom in going around the village, now being able to visit Hinata's, Lee's, and Shino's house. Naruto, Hinata, and Shino had soon met Guy, who if needed to be described was just a big and louder, God knows if that's even possible, version of Lee. They also met Shino's father who was a quiet man, but still acknowledged them. Naruto and Hinata had become extremely close and were usually inseparable. Naruto even told Hinata that she was his best friend. Now Hinata may have been below the age of 8, but due to the mental training and harsh household of the Hyuga clan, she was well over the age of 12 mentally. As Naruto saw her as the best friend, she saw him as something closer. Back to Naruto, he was currently eating ramen at an extremely fast rate. This was a very rare to see him without Hinata, but he needs some time to himself, especially with what was going to happen in a couple of days. So Naruto-kun, what are you going to get Hinata-chan? Asked Ayame from behind the counter, as she watched Naruto eat. Naruto stopped eating, gasped, and looked up at her. To tell you the truth, I really don't know. But you must have at least looked around for something, stated Ayame. Naruto sighed. Every time I go into a store, the owner kicks me out, that's if I'm lucky. Ayame frowned as she remembered, right. I'm sorry. Ayame instantly changed moods, as she came up with something. Naruto-kun, father and I could do your shopping. Naruto shook his head. No, I don't want to bother you guys with something like that. Naruto, you know we would be happy to help you at any time. Ayame said, as she smiled at Naruto and turned around. Right, father. Ichiraku looked over his shoulder from the stove at them. We would, Naruto-kun, so ask anytime. You still have to pay for ramen though. Ichiraku turned back to his work, as Ayame glared at his back. Naruto had taken the time to finish his ramen, before speaking again. Thank you, but still, she's my friend and I want to be the one to find Hinata-chan's present. That way I know it's special. Naruto said smiling. I hope you find what you're looking for, Naruto-kun. Ayame bent over the counter and gave Naruto a kiss on the forehead, causing him to blush. Tell Anko-chan I said hi. Ayame said as she smiled warmly at Naruto. I will. See ya, Ayame-chan. See ya, old man. Naruto yelled as he left, while Ayame sighed. Damn it, why the hell can't he be like that with me? Ayame asked in frustration, as her father turned to face her. Aren't you a little old for him? He asked, while raising an eyebrow. I'm only 4 years older than him, meaning he's still available to me. Ayame stated. Not when he thinks about you like a sister. I'll just have to change that, now won't I? Ayame said, as she winked and gave her father a very frightening smile. Ichiraku turned back to his work, afraid for what was going to happen at this point and for the weeks to come. Suddenly Naruto bursted through into the ramen stand yelling, startling both Ayame and Ichiraku. Ayame-chan, old man, look at what I found. Hinata was currently walking around Kohona at a relaxed pace, searching for Naruto. She hadn't seen him in a couple days and was starting to get worried. Her sister Hanaiba had decided to go with her sister this time. She wanted to meet this Naruto-kun, the person who seemed to make her sister stronger for some reason. Hanaiba herself thought it was some kind of training he had given Hinata, and if it was enough to make her sister improve, then she wouldn't mind adding it to hers. Hanaiba soon regretted this when they met Lee along the way, who was busy trying to have a conversation with her. She just stayed quiet. Gai-sensei then performed the technique in front of my own eyes. It showed his burning youth in so many ways that it would make all of ours seem like children. The passion of the move was, Hanaiba's eye was twitching quite a bit. It was only a matter of time before she killed Lee. Hinata noticed this. Hanaiba-chan, IW was W wondering why you decided to see come W with me while IL looked for N Naruto-kun. Hinata asked, as Hanaiba looked over at her sister. I'm interested in meeting him. Hanaiba stated, trying to ignore Lee, and failing. Oh. Hinata replied, as she turned her attention back to the road they were traveling on. Hi, I remember like it was yesterday. Actually it was that my spurt of youth led Naruto to me. As he needed my help. Lee stated, as Hinata looked at him in shock. Oh god, he somehow managed to get louder. Hinata quickly shook off the thought and took in what Lee said. Why would Naruto need Lee's help? Hinata thought Lee was a good friend who believed in her, like Naruto, but to be honest, he was pretty much useless. That is unless you had to break something, of course. Lee-kun, why did N Naruto-kun need your help? Hinata asked, as Lee looked over at her. Sorry Hinata-chan, but I cannot tell you, for Naruto-kun has made me swear on my spirit of youth not to tell anyone. Lee said, as Hinata looked down in disappointment. Do not worry, for your youthful passion shall guide you to him so that he may tell you. Hanaiba had it with Lee and began to walk ahead of them. Hinata looked over at Hanaiba with a confused expression. Hanaiba-chan, where are you going? I can't take any more of that idiot. Tell me when you find Naruto, I'm going back to the mansion. Hanaiba stated, as she walked off leaving Hinata to continue her search and Lee to continue being himself. Still do you think she'll like it? The small child asked, as he looked up at the woman walking beside him. She was a tall woman around 5 feet 9 and had long dark purple hair. She wore a basic black kimono, nothing special. Though it did show her curves quite well. The woman looked down at the child. I'm sure she'll love it, Naruto. Replied the woman as she glanced at the object. How much work are you going to do on it? Naruto assumed a thoughtful position. Well, I have its shape already, but I still need a color and a design. Ayame-chan said that she would help me with the last part. The woman smiled warmly at the child. It sounds like you're putting a lot of work into this. Naruto nodded vigorously. Yep. Hinata-chan is my best friend after all. Now what am I design should I use for it? The woman assumed her own thinking position, smiling a few seconds later while turning her attention back to Naruto. I have an idea Naruto-kun, but you'll have to hold still for a moment. Naruto looked at her in a confused way as she walked behind him. The woman looked through her purse and pulled out a mirror. She grabbed Naruto's left arm and positioned it to where Naruto could see behind him. Keep the mirror in that position, Naruto. Naruto nodded his head, as the woman pulled another mirror and positioned it in front of her. Now look through the mirror. Naruto looked at the mirror and gasped at what he saw. It was the perfect design, small, yet had a powerful meaning. Hinata-chan said she even liked it once. Naruto turned around and grinned at the woman, before giving her a bear hug. I take it you agree. The woman said, as she giggled. It's perfect. Thank you. Naruto replied as he released the woman from his hug. I'm glad to have helped you Naruto-kun. The woman brought her wrist up and looked at her watch. I'm sorry to say this, but I have to go. I have to go see Hayate about something. Naruto nodded his head, understanding. It's okay, I need to go see Shino-kun anyway. Naruto started to run off as the woman waved to him. Bye Naruto-kun, she yelled. Naruto turned around and waved. Bye Yugao-chan. The Hokage was having a very stressful day. First, he somehow managed to fall off his bed and land face first on the ground, causing it to break, sending him downwards into the kitchen, smashing the oven and getting yelled at by his wife half an hour later, who caught him frantically trying to repair it. Trying being the keyword. After leaving his house, he was chased down the street by the neighbor's dog. Sure, he could have used a Kaiden jutsu and fried its ass, but he didn't want to harm it out of the respect that it was technically a Konoha citizen. Besides, he still owned a puppy to that little girl. Moving on, he was soon accompanied by his grandson, which made putting up with all the crap that had happened before a little less stressful on his mind. That was until Konohamaru started to do a interesting technique that Naruto had taught him a week ago, causing him to get in a shitload of trouble again. He was going to have to label that technique as a kinjutsu later, sexy no jutsu, he thought it was called. He was currently in a meeting, which did give him a lot of stress. The last war left them a little weaker than normal, having lost almost all of their Junin and soon losing the fourth as well. The conditions they were setting were intimidating, but could be done. The third knew that, even if they had repaired the village and replaced the Junin, most rookies, of course they still could not fight a full-out war. Also the fact that people would take this opportunity to gone things in their favor. He looked at the representative and sighed he might regret this later, but for now, he needed all the help he could get. He looked at the contract one more time, before signing it and watching the man's face form into a smile. Thank you Hokage-sama, we'll send you a copy of the contract as soon as possible, stated the representative, as the Hokage watched the man put away the contract. You remember your part of the deal? Asked the Hokage, as the man turned his attention toward the third. Yes, we agree to not attack this village in its current state and to help provide supplies and support, if and when needed, stated the man. And in return, we send 35 of any and all money we make, in respect of your help, replied the Hokage. He personally didn't like this, they were basically getting ripped off. Sure, D and C missions weren't worth much, but A, S, and even some B-class mission were worth a lot of money. They also were what kept this village alive, and to cut it down would set them back quite a bit. How long do you plan to continue staying at the village? Asked the Hokage. About 2 or 3 more days, depending on certain conditions. The Hokage's eyes narrowed, before returning to normal. Very well, I expect a copy of the contract in 2 weeks, you are dismissed. The man bowed, before heading towards the exit. Oh, and give the Raikage my regards. Don't worry, I will, replied the Cloud Nin, as he walked out the door. Shino was sitting peacefully on a tree branch, watching the sunset. He had a lot to think about. Naruto had been avoiding Hinata for the past couple of days in fear that he may tell her about her present. Of course Hinata didn't know the reason, thus she was getting worried. Now Shino might not look like it, especially with how short he was, but he does have a matured mind. Since he is the heir to his family's clan, of course. He could easily see what Naruto was to Hinata and already knew Naruto had the Kyuubi inside of him. He never once thought differently of Naruto, hell he felt sympathy, knowing what it's like not to be acknowledged for being normal, with his bugs and all. Shino knew things were only going to get worse, ever since yesterday when Naruto visited him. Are you sure about this? Asked Shino, still not showing any emotion. Naruto was used to it by now. Positive, replied Naruto. Once this is done there's no turning back. I know. You've told me already. Just get the hell on with it. Naruto said, with irritation clearly in his voice. Shino sighed, as his bugs left his body and flew towards the object. As soon as they reached it, they quickly slipped inside and began to work. After about an hour, the bugs finally finished. Shino walked towards the object and carefully wrapped it in a cloth, before giving it to Naruto. Wait 3 hours before removing the cloth, it should have tried by then. Shino stated, as Naruto nodded and began to run off. Naruto stopped in his tracks and turned back to Shino. Shino-kun, Naruto said, getting the boy's attention. Quote. Yes. Shino replied. Thank you. Naruto then proceeded to run in the direction of the ramen stand. Shino shook his head slightly. Naruto had no clue what was going to happen if he gave Hinata the present with that symbol on it. Basically, all hell was going to break loose. Naruto is too young mentally to understand what it means, and Hinata was going to be excited for months, maybe even years to come. Whoever gave Naruto the idea of using that symbol was good, he'd give them that much. Shino snapped out of his thoughts and turned his attention towards a group of birds that were flying over the tree and towards the sunset. A symbol with consequences. The sun shined brightly through the trees, reflecting what was left of the morning dew on the grass. The birds sang a heavenly chorus of chirps, while a few sakura petals fell down due to the slight breeze going. Local animals awoke from their slumber and took notice of the three people walking down the road. See, I told you that this was a better route, stated Naruto, as he watched the two females look in awe at the scenery. It's beautiful, Naruto-kun, replied one of the females, who still continued to look around. Naruto turned his attention towards her. I knew that you would like it, Ayame-chan. Naruto then looked at his other companion. How do you like it, Yugao-chan? Quote. Yagwo looked down at Naruto. I love it, thank you for showing it to us, she said, as she smiled warmly. Even though we're now even later than we were to begin with. Naruto head dropped a bit. I know, I just thought you guys would enjoy this. Still, we're going to be late for Hinata's birthday party and you could have at least worn something else, said Yugao. Naruto looked at his cloths to see his regular jumpsuit before looking at what the girls were wearing. Yugao was wearing a purple kimono made entirely out of silk. It had an interesting design of two dragons swerving up the leg section of her clothing and turning towards the back at the waist, meeting near the shoulder blades. Ayame was wearing a light blue kimono with what looked like the design of red sakura petals gently flying in the wind. No comment, Naruto replied, as the two women sighed. Think I have time to change? Quote. Naruto-kun, it's 11:30 a.m., we're already half an hour late, stated Ayame-chan. By the way, Naruto-kun, did you remember Hinata-chan's present? Quote. Naruto grinned, as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a case. Yep, all wrapped and ready to go. Naruto thought for a moment. Hey, what did you guys bring? You'll find out at the party, Ayame said, as she and Yugao started to walk ahead. Naruto just smiled evilly. That's what you think. Naruto lessened his pace and started to form some seals. Up in front, both Ayame and Yugao were chatting with one another. Think we should tell him what we got for Hinata-chan? You do know he'll bug us until he finds out, right? Stated Ayame, as Yugao looked at her with a smirk. Don't worry, we can tune him out. Besides, it's not like he has anything furry that can annoy us. You still have nightmares, huh? Ayame said, as Yugao visibly shivered. I am never going to do another mission for a woman who is obsessed with cats again. Well, it's nice to see that you have a goal in Lee. Ayame stopped in mid-sentence and moved around a bit. Hey, do you feel itchy? She asked, as she turned her attention towards Yugao, who was also moving around. Yeah, I do, she replied, while reaching over her shoulder trying to scratch her back. Ayame started to scratch her legs. A few seconds later, the two started to scratch more wildly, as they took notice of something. The girls screamed, as two visible lumps were now seen going all over their kimonos. The girls were now on the ground scratching and hitting their kimonos, trying to stop whatever was inside them. Yugao started to yell about how she felt fur running all over her body. When the lump on Ayame stopped near her chest, she looked down her kimono to see 8 eyes staring at her. She screamed again, as the lump moved down her body and towards her legs, shooting out into the open. The lump on Yugao circled her waist and back a couple times before going towards the back of her neck and out her collar, as both girls stood up. The girls couldn't believe what they saw next. A small spider and squirrel were running away and taking 2 wrapped boxes with them. The spider dragged the wrapped box behind with its web, as the squirrel carried the other box by biting onto its ribbon. When they finally reached their destination, the spider crawled up Naruto's left leg and onto his shoulder, while the squirrel jumped onto his right. The girls' eyes started to twitch, as they watched him pet both of the creatures. "Good job, guys," he said, while he held the presents with his other hand. "Naruto," both girls said, as they gritted their teeth. Naruto turned his attention towards them. "Like them, his name's Faji," Naruto said, as he pointed towards the squirrel. "And his name's Anemono, or Amy for short," Naruto said, pointing towards the spider. "Don't let their size fool you, they're still kick-ass summons." Quote. "Faji. My passion burns bright." The squirrel then struck a pose. "Amy. Good evening, ladies." The spider glanced at the 2 females before him. Of course, all the girls heard was some nosies and clicks, along with watching the squirrel pose. Both girls formed a sweat drop on their head, as Yugao remembered what Naruto said. "Summons? What the hell? He's not even supposed to be able to do henge, let alone summon," Yugao thought, as she turned her attention towards Naruto. "These are summons, Naruto?" Yugao asked in a serious tone of voice. Naruto nodded his head vigorously, while he lifted his left hand. "Yeah, see." Both Ayame and Yugao looked at Naruto's hand closely. On the tip of his index finger was a small red dot, and on the middle finger was a small black coil-looking design. Yugao sighed. "Who gave you these summons, Naruto-kun?" Quote. "Lee and Shino-kun did." This shocked Yugao. A heir to a clan gave Naruto one of their summons. This was extremely rare. Hell, this hadn't happened in 13 years. Shino was more than mature enough to know what consequences came with that particular summons contract, and yet he still gave Naruto it. She was going to have a word with Shino later about this. Lee wasn't from a clan and wasn't mature enough to understand his actions, so it was somewhat alright. Yugao snapped out of her thoughts when she noticed Ayame looking around the area. "What are you doing, Ayame-san?" Ayame turned her attention towards her. "I swear, I only took my eyes off him for a second." Both of them heard a yell, as they turned their heads to see Naruto running ahead of them. "Kamen, catch me if you can," he yelled, as he continued to run ahead. Both continued to stare in Naruto's direction, before looking at each other. "Doesn't he still have Hinata-chan's presence?" Ayame asked, as she looked back in the direction that Naruto ran in. "He does." A second later, both girls were running in hot pursuit of Naruto. "Naruto, get your ass back here." Quote. Hinata was having one of the best days in her life. She had been very excited about today for a long time, since everything seemed to be perfect on this day. First, she was able to complete her drills and lessons, not only early, but without messing up. Afterwards, she was able to spend time with her father, which was rare for Hinata nowadays and very enjoyable. She then had a sparring match against Neji, and, even though she was again beaten by him, he complimented her, which was a gift in its own way. Hinata thought about this, as she sat on her chair in the waiting room, opening the door and greeting people as they came. She heard someone knock on the door, as she got up and walked towards it. Now only one more thing could make this day perfect for her. One little thing that could make all the difference. That was his gift, after all. "Hi, Hinata-chan," Naruto said, as he gave her his famous grin. A few minutes later, after being tackled to the ground and brought into a bone-crushing hug, Naruto was finally released from Hinata's grip and, of course, allowed to breath. Ayame's eye twitched slightly, as she watched the two. The three were led inside by Hinata a minute later. Her house was huge, and that's putting it lightly. The mansion could easily be a labyrinth, as it had hundreds of rooms, hallways, walkways, etc. The party was being held outside, in the mansion's garden, which itself was large enough to be a miniature-sized park, complete with waterfall. After some sparring and games, the group decided to have some cake, which was about 7 feet tall. Lee, being himself, started to get excited about this and yelled about the spurt of youth. Rushing forward to try and hug the people who made the cake, which were the people who also were carrying the cake. So naturally, it went flying, covering half the guests in the process, including Hiashi. Naruto had managed to save Hinata and her new pink kimono from getting covered in cake, while Yugao, Ayame, and Shino were not as lucky. After being cleaned up, everyone watched Hinata open her presents. Both Yugao and Ayame's presents were new clothing, Shino's was a kitten, which she accepted with open arms, and of course, Lee's was 4 sets of 50-pound training weights for the arms and legs and a female version of his green, mighty suit, which was whisked away by one of the branch members. Probably to be sent to Stone Country, because they're retarded enough to accept it. As for Naruto's present, well, open mine next, Hinata-chan, Naruto said, as he watched her pull it out of the stack of presents. Hinata slowly unwrapped, revealing a jewelry case. She was about to open it, when she remembered something. Naruto-kun, before I open my birthday present, you need to open up yours. She stated, as Naruto looked at her strangely. What do you mean? I forgot to give you a birthday present last October, so I've been working on one for a while now. Hinata disappeared into the mansion, coming out a few minutes later with a medium-sized box. Naruto walked over and slowly opened it and pulled out what was inside. A large orange hottie was inside, somewhat simple. Except for the fact that the hod had sewn on fox ears, fake of course, and an oversized fox tail sewn on the back. He pulled the top part of his jumpsuit off, revealing his black shirt, and slipped the hottie on. Hinata watched him for a few moments, waiting for an answer. Do you like it, Naruto-kun? Asked Hinata, as Naruto turned his attention towards her. I do, Hinata, thank you. Naruto replied, as he gave her a warm smile. This not only made her blush red, but made her heart melt. The other girls in the room also had the same reaction. They had no clue how a 8-year-old could do it, but he did, and with just one very rare smile. Now it's your turn to open yours, stated Naruto, as Hinata turned her attention towards the box. She opened it and gasped at what was inside. A necklace with a tear-shaped crystal was lying in it. The tear crystal was honey-colored, as the necklace itself was small sapphire-colored pearls, that you could see through. The most special thing about it was that, in the center of the tear was the Uzumaki spiral, with 9 little wave lines, spreading outwards from the spiral. When she saw this, all she could do was stare in shock. All the people in the room were also speechless, their eyes bulging from their sockets. After a minute, Naruto walked up to Hinata. Do you like it, Hinata-chan? He asked in a somewhat confused and saddened voice. Hinata looked at him with tears in her eyes, as she tackled him to the ground, in a hug. I accept, Hinata said, as Naruto looked at her confusedly. The hell? You accept what? Naruto said, as Hiashi snapped to his senses and walked forward. Naruto, did anyone, by chance, help you come up with this design? Hiashi asked, as he watched Naruto and Hinata stand up. He hoped to Kami-sama that Naruto had help. Yep. Yugao-chan did, Naruto said, as everyone's heads trailed towards Yugao, who was balancing on the balls of her feet, hands behind her back, and whistling a light tone. She looked at the people staring at her. What? I thought they'd make a cute couple. She winced slightly, as killing intent was emitted in her direction, especially from Ayame. Hiashi sighed in relief before his face hardened, as he turned towards the quests. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid the party's now over. He signaled for branch members to help rush the people out of the compound. He looked over at the branch member standing next to him. Summon the council for an emergency meeting. The branch member nodded, as she ran off, leaving Hiashi to sit down and rub his temples. This was going to be a long day. As Naruto was being rushed out by the branch member, he could not help but wonder. Did I do something wrong? Quote, all hell was loose in the room, as all 12 of Konoha's great clans were shouting and yelling at one another. The Yamanakas, Naras, and Akamichis were yelling about how they're too young for it and how it can't be allowed. The Uchihas and Harunos were yelling about how the demon should be killed for attempting this. The Abarames, Hyugas, and of course the Uzumakis were yelling about how Naruto is just a child and didn't know better. The rest of the clans were just trying to stay out of this. That's enough, roared the Hokage, as everyone went quiet. Now Hiashi-sama, please start from the beginning. Hiashi nodded, as he stood forward. To start, it all began when my daughter, Hinata, opened the case to reveal Naruto's gift. After seeing the Uzumaki symbol on it, she almost immediately agreed. This caused another uproar, which was quickly silenced by the third. Afterward, when Naruto seemed confused about the whole situation, I asked him if he had any help in choosing. One of his friends, whose name will not be said, pointed out the symbol on his jacket, which was the Uzumaki symbol. The third sighed in relief. So in other words, he had no clue that he was proposing to Hinata. Replied the Hokage, as Hiashi nodded. Hiashi, what is your say in this? The Hyuga follow tradition to the last letter, it's irreversible, replied Hiashi. The Hokage nodded his head, understanding. Could there possibly be a way around this? Asked the Hokage. No, not to my knowledge. The Hokage sighed. Before deciding on a verdict, does anyone have anything to add beforehand? The Harunos and Uchihas, that doesn't involve burning Naruto alive, they slowly lowered them. A hand raised from the Inazuke clan. Yes, Hana. Inazuke Hana stood up from her seat. Hokage-sama, why not allow a compromise? Quote. Explain. We've been so busy trying to decide the fate of two people that we've yet to see how they feel about it. Let the two decide their own lives. She said, as a few people agreed with her. She has a point, I say let them decide. Nara Shikato said, as the Yamanakas and Akamichis started to agree. But we can't let that. The Uchiha stopped when noticed the Hokage's glare. Boy breed, you know what he carries. It may be passed down to the Hyuga. There were whispers going around the room, as the third spoke up. I assure you, that when the fourth passed the seal on Naruto, he meant for him to carry the Kyuubi to the end of his days. In which, at that point, the Kyuubi will die along with the host. Any children he has will have his powers, though nothing more. The Hokage looked around to see them still looking at him in disbelief. You don't know that for certain. I know well enough to trust the fourth's judgment and his making of the seal. But we can't take that kind of chance, replied the Uchiha, as the room once again erupted into shouts, threats, etc. That was until a familiar Sanin made herself known. Shut up, yelled Tsunade, as everyone looked towards her. Now that I have your attention, Hokage-sama, do you mind if I make the conditions of the compromise? That depends on what the conditions are, stated the Hokage. Well, for one, they're too young to be married. I say you set a later date for them to be married, around 17. Second, they would be able to marry someone else if they so chose, but if either of them have not married by the date, then they will be forced to marry one another, whether they want or not. The third looked around the room. Does anyone disagree? A few hands would have gone up, if not for the death glare Tsunade sent them, causing them to keep quiet. Then it is settled. If neither of them have married before the age of 17, then they will be married one another. You are all dism. The Hokage was about to finish his sentence when someone came up to him and whispered something in his ear. A second later. What? A little earlier. Naruto was walking down the same road that Hiyame and Yugao took, still wearing the haughty Hinata had given him. The stars shined brightly over Naruto, as the quietness of the forest allowed him to relax. He was currently thinking about what had happened earlier that evening. He didn't know what had happened. Hell, he was clueless about the whole thing. All he knew is that Hinata had apparently accepted something and that, in some way, he was in trouble. Naruto sighed, as he looked up at the stars. All he wanted to do was give Hinata her present and wish her a happy birthday, not screw it up. She even cried when he gave her the necklace. Hinata was his first best friend, or really, his first friend period. He had messed up the day that was supposed to be special for, a day that usual meant the world to people. He could only think of one thing at the moment. How am I going to make it up to her? Naruto asked, just above a whisper. He quickly snapped out of his thoughts, as his head jerked towards the source of the recent noise. He managed to catch a glimpse of a figure jumping towards another tree, carrying two people on his shoulder. The one supposedly knocked out, Naruto could identify the person as Hinata's sister, Hanabi, while the other one was Hinata. Naruto thought, as he gave chase to the figure. It was hard keeping up and staying quiet at the same time. The figure almost noticed him a couple times, but he managed to keep hidden. When Naruto noticed that they were heading towards a clearing, he got an idea. Naruto stopped on the tree he was currently on and he ran up the bark, while gathering an insane amount of chakra. In less than 10 seconds, the amount of chakra shot him forward, with an explosion in the background. The figure turned quickly enough to receive a hard hit to the head, sending him into the clearing while dropping the other two people. Naruto managed to catch the two and set them gently on the ground. Hinata looked up at Naruto, who was now standing in front of her. Naruto-kun, she said, as the genjutsu from earlier started to finally kick in and knocked her out. Naruto doesn't know about the genjutsu. Naruto glanced down at her with worry in his eyes, looking back up a second later at the figure. The figure chucked as, what Naruto could now determine, he stood casually, like nothing had happened. You've got a good punch, kid, I'll give you that much. What the hell do you want with them? Naruto asked, as he watched the man carefully for any signs of movement. I just wanted to see what made their family so special. Nothing more, stated the figure, as he watched. Naruto's eyes widened a bit. Their family's special? Naruto asked confusedly. Yes, don't you know about their blood limit? The figure asked within a curious tone of voice. Blood limit? The figure sighed. Look, if you don't know what it is, don't worry about it. Just be a good little brat and let me take them with me. The figure started to walk towards Naruto, but quickly stopped and deflected some shuriken. Are you sure you know what you're doing, kid? You're going to get yourself killed. I know one thing, Naruto said, as he glanced one more time at the two, before he turned back towards the figure. And that is you're not taking either of them, he stated, as he went into a basic taijutsu stance. Without a fight. Burning passion. Anko. I know one thing, Naruto said, as he glanced one more time at the two, before he turned back towards the figure. And that is you're not taking either of them, he stated, as he went into a basic taijutsu stance. Without a fight. The Cloud Nin sighed, as he watched Naruto go into a basic fighting stance. Oh well, I almost feel bad for the kid. The Cloud Nin then charged at Naruto. Of course he was holding back, seeing how this was only a child he was fighting. When he reached Naruto, he swung his fist upward towards the gut, trying to finish this quickly. Naruto dashed right and tried to deliver a kick to the head. The Cloud Nin jumped out of the way and threw a wave of kunai at Naruto. Naruto jumped into the air, as the Cloud Nin threw a second wave of kunai at him. Naruto countered with his own mixture wave of kunai and shuriken. The Cloud Nin then jumped towards Naruto, who was still in the air, and slashed him with a kunai. The Cloud Nin wore a smirk on his face, which soon disappeared when he saw the remains of a log. Kawarimi no Jutsu, the Cloud Nin thought, as he formed a few quick seals and whispered to himself. A second later, throwing towards the ground a couple small crackling balls, which glowed a bright yellow. When Naruto noticed these from his hiding place, he could only think of one thing. Oh shish. The ground exploded in a bright flash of yellow, as electricity ripped through the ground, creating a few small craters. The Cloud Nin, who had been watching this, quickly spun around. Only to get his in the face by a chakra-enhanced punch, sending him flying into a nearby tree. Naruto continued to soar in the air, until he reached a tree and jumped off of it to another tree. There he jumped upward, did a few flips and landed on the ground. The local squirrels in the area held up cards with numbers on them from a tree branch. 2 held up 10s, while the third one held up a 8.5. Naruto glared at the squirrel. Squirrel. What? I've seen better. It stated. Naruto turned his attention back towards the Cloud Nin, just in time to deflect a wave of kunai. The Cloud Nin rushed forward with a katana in his hand. Katana rain. He yells, as he begins to stable Naruto at incredible speeds. The Cloud Nin stopped and watched, as Naruto fell slowly backwards, only to be shocked when he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Shit. Cage Bunshin. The Cloud Nin thought, as a big-ass wave of needles came at him from all directions. He quickly formed some seals, as he held his hand upward, holding a small crackling ball. An explosion once again ranged through the forest, while the Cloud Nin formed more seals. He quickly threw what looked like rings towards a group of trees, high in the air, like shurikens. Piercing through the trees easily and continuing onward. The Cloud Nin smiled, as a few leaves fell down from the tree. Naruto, on the other hand, just got the shit scared out of him. He shaked a bit, still continuing to hold his hands and feet in place between the two trees. He looked down to see that the shuriken had slightly grazed him, as they passed by. Any lower and he would have been neutered right about now. He focused chakra into his left hand and foot, allowing him to bounce off the tree towards another one. The Cloud Nin jumped towards the trees and threw another wave at Naruto, while he continued to follow Naruto and run along the trees. Hiashi was running on the rooftops, looking frantically for Hinata and Hanabi. He had assembled all the branch house members and were now looking all over Konoha for them. Well, actually, his wife assembled the house members. When he reached the mansion, he found he crying in the arms of his sister-in-law, Neji's mother. When he tried to calm her down, he was beaten severely with a frying pan, as she yelled at him to go find them. Personally, he was glad the others decided to wait outside. He defiantly wouldn't them to see him get the shit beat out of him with a cooking utensil. Back to the search, other clans were helping as well, searching every nook and cranny for the two. Each using their own unique way of finding them, which lead to there being swarms of bugs, packs of dogs, birds, people, clones, etc. Hell, even shadows were searching. He only hoped to be able to find them, if not for their sake, then for his own. Hiashi snapped out of his thoughts, as he heard someone call out to him. He turned in the direction of the voice to see Anko running on another building. Hiashi, have you seen Naruto? Anko yelled. No, I haven't. He yelled back. He just noticed how strange that was. Many people had been coming up to him, asking if he knew where Hinata and Hanabi might have gone, but not once had he seen Naruto. He was now starting to worry about him as well. I starting to get worried. If you see him, keep him with you, alright? Anko yelled, as she disappeared, searching for Naruto. Hiashi was now starting to think of what could have happened. First his daughters, now could only ask himself one question at this point. What the hell is going on? Naruto continued to jump from branch to branch, dodging shuriken every few seconds. The man seemed to have a lot of chakra, since he had no problem wasting so much of it. Naruto had been hit a couple of times, nothing vital, but it still hurt like hell. He could only hope to lead the Nin as far away from Hinata and her sister as he could, praying that his luck would hold out. The Cloud Nin, on the other hand, was get impatient. He had been fighting Naruto for 15 minutes now and was growing tired of this little game. He formed more shuriken and, with chakra, made them hover above his hand in a circle. The shuriken started to spin rapidly on their own, before spinning clockwise together, forming a large electrical ring. Using more chakra, the Cloud Nin flung the ring towards Naruto at high speeds. Naruto was busy trying to think of a way to stall for time. Surely someone must have heard those explosions and was coming to check it out, or better, had alerted the Anbu. If Naruto could just hold out a while longer, then maybe the Nin could be stopped. Naruto had just jumped off another branch when he felt a violet vibration under him. He looked down in time to see a bigger version of the Nin's chakra shuriken pass under him, just grazing his sandals. If it weren't for the crisis at hand, Naruto probably would have shit himself. Naruto continued to dodge the giant ring shuriken for a couple of minutes, until the Nin switched tactics. The Cloud Nin formed some seals, as he again whispered something under his breath. His fingertips started to glow purple, as he formed his hand in the shape of a gun. He aimed at Naruto and shot a burst of chakra at him, just missing him as he jumped off the branch. Of course Naruto took notice of this. When he reached the tree branch, he used chakra and jumped towards another, making sure he was behind a tree. The Cloud Nin stayed on his pervious branch and continued to aim at Naruto. He missed and hit a tree's bark, because Naruto had hidden behind it and missed when Naruto was in the open, only hitting a branch. The Cloud Nin took careful aim this time and shot at the branch Naruto just landed on, causing him to jump and throw a rain of shuriken at the Cloud Nin. The Cloud Nin deflected the shuriken, a second later showing a shocked expression, as a wave of needles hit him from behind. Naruto was surprised when he saw a puff of smoke and a log, or what was left of it, fall towards the ground. Naruto turned just in time to get slashed by the Cloud Nin, who flew by and bounced off a tree, back towards him. The Cloud Nin continued to bounce off the trees in a pinball-like style, as he slashed Naruto every time he could. After a minute of two, the Cloud Nin gave one final hard slash that sent Naruto flying downwards, through a tree, and into another open area. The Cloud Nin then threw some small crackling balls towards Naruto. Naruto rolled to the side, missing the explosion. Naruto had got on one knee and was about to stand up, when the Cloud Nin came out of nowhere and slashed right through him with his kunai. Naruto grinned, as he disappeared in a puff of smoke. The Cloud Nin was slashed from behind, sending him to the ground. He got on his knees and looked up in time to see Naruto, bouncing off the trees and heading towards him. Naruto then proceeded to do what the Cloud Nin had done to him, bouncing off the walls, slashing the Nin, whenever he could. Of course, since this was the Cloud Nin's technique, he had a countermeasure for it. He started to form seals, not paying any attention to Naruto. When the seals were done, he let out a scream, as the ground below them cracked and sent a huge amount of electricity upwards. Naruto was struck hard by this technique and was sent to the ground. Naruto tried to get up, but fell back to the ground. He was exhausted. I mean, come on, an 8-year-old lasted this long against a shinobi that is not only 3 times his age, maybe more, but also more experienced. All Naruto could do was watch, as the Cloud Nin walked up towards him. Well, that was a fun and all, but I have things to do. Now it's time to end this. The Cloud Nin said, as he drew his katana. Personally, he was glad this was going to be over. The kid managed to give him a decent fight and that frightened him. He only hoped to kill the kid quickly and get those two out of the forest. Good thing they were so far out, or else people might have noticed the explosions from earlier. He positioned it right above Naruto's neck and lifted it upwards. Preparing to swing. Naruto closed his eyes waiting for the blow. No, it can't end like this. If I die, he'll take them. I can't let him take them. I won't let him take them. I swear that he won't leave with them. I swear on my life that he won't leave here with them. I'll protect both of them, I'll protect. Hinata. Naruto felt something strange coursing through him, as he felt like his soul was being ripped from his body. He opened his eyes quickly to see that he was no longer in an open area, but what looked like a sewer. Naruto looked at his reflection in the water, with his face widening in shock. All his injuries were gone and his cloths looked brand new, not a single tear on them. He couldn't believe it. How the hell did all of this happen? As Naruto thought about what was going on, he heard faint laughter coming from one of the many tunnels surrounding him. He started to head towards the voice, making sure to watch his step, so that he won't slip and fall. To his amazement, he found a large cage at the very end of the tunnel. He slowly approached it, careful of what might inside. Suddenly, two big red eyes appeared, as Naruto stumbled backwards. The creature grinned, as it laughed at him. Naruto just glared at the creature. Shut up. The creature stopped all of a sudden, just staring at Naruto. A few seconds had passed of just staring at one another, until. What right do you have to command me, mortal? The creature yelled, for what he could tell was female, as Naruto just glared at it. Whatever. Now the creature's defiantly pissed. It reaches its paw out and tries to swipe Naruto. Of course Naruto naturally jumps to his senses and avoids it, barely. Bringing out some kunai and prepared for what was next. The creature hesitated a bit. A freaking 8-year-old was able to dodge her attack. The creature looks into Naruto's eyes and notices something flicker in them, something she hasn't seen in years. Interesting kid, thought the creature, as she grins again. Tell me, child, what is your name? She had a feeling of who he was, but one could never be too careful. Other creatures had a tendency to screw up and somehow end up within her domain. Which was fun for her since she would always just kill or eat them, depending on her mood. Who wants to know? Naruto asks, narrowing his eyes. Child, do you know who I am? Quote, no, I am the great Kyuubi. Kyuubi said proudly, waiting for Naruto to cower in fear of her. Only to have a reality check when she was hit with a rock. OWW. What the fuck? She asked. Liar. Naruto yelled, as he pointed at her. Everyone knows that the fourth sealed the Kyuubi in a fish. Kyuubi's sweat dropped. What the hell? A fish? Why couldn't they come up with something more creative? Kyuubi thought, as she looked at Naruto. Look kid, just tell me your name. Why the hell should I? If you tell me your name and you're who I think you are, then I'll give you something. Replied the Kyuubi, as she watched Naruto think it over. Taking in the pros and cons of telling her his name. Alright, deal. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. The Kyuubi sighed. Yep, it was him, her carrier. Damn it, she was in the mood to eat something too. So what's the gift? Naruto asked in a hyper tone of voice, bouncing up and down in anticipation. Kyuubi sighed, while thinking of having to put up with an 8-year-old. First of all, Naruto-kun, I need to tell you a few things. So settle down, she yelled, as Naruto stopped. That's better. First off, the fourth did not seal the Kyuubi inside of a fish, but within something else, a child. Naruto nodded for her to continue. Now the only way that I, the Kyuubi, could be sealed into a child is if it was only a few hours old. As luck would have it, only one child was born on that day. I was sealed using the forbidden technique, into the child as soon as possible, but the technique also cost the fourth's life. Thus no one heard his final wishes. That was 8 years ago. The Kyuubi stopped for a moment before continuing on. The boy grew up, barring the demon as a burden, being harassed by his own people. Some even tried to kill this child, in spite of the fact that he was so young. But, who was the child? Asked Naruto. Tell me, Naruto-kun. What was the official date that I was defeated? Quote. That's easy, October 10th. Now tell me, when is your birthday? Weird question, but it's October 10th. There it hit Naruto like a ton of bricks. No. Yes, you are that child. The Kyuubi replied, as Naruto thought about his past, remembering all the suffering, all the pain, all the hatred. How the villagers shunned him, always coming up with an excuse, any excuse just to hit him. How they looked at him with disgust, wishing for even the littlest of harm to happen to him. Naruto continued to look through his memories, remembering all that had happened. He stopped all of a sudden. He had found one memory that made all the others disappear, never to resurface. Kyuubi noticed the glint returning once again in Naruto's eye, as he looked at her. Kyuubi, you said that you had a gift for me, stated Naruto, as he watched the Kyuubi, never once shifting his gaze. Hi, I did, but will it help me become stronger? Naruto asked, cutting her off. She slowly nodded. Then I accept. I don't care what the consequences are, so I ask you Kyuubi, lend me your strength. Kyuubi sighed, as she made her tails move towards him, all 9 wrapping around him. A second later he was lifted into the air, coming face to face with the Kyuubi. Her eyes glowed brightly, as a surge of energy swept through the tails and towards Naruto, causing him to scream in pain. His body glowed bright red, as he felt his soul being returned to his body. The third sighed, as he more people and or birds came and told him that they hadn't found Hinata, Hanabi, or Naruto yet. He hadn't known about Naruto until half an hour ago, when his mother personally beat the crap out of the Anbu guarding his door and confronted him. He was in deep shit now. Not only was there Hinata's and Hanabi's mother, but Naruto's mother to deal with now. In his very long lifespan, he had learned a long time ago never to piss off a woman, unless he wanted to be tortured with a slow and painfully death, or castrated, meaning the use of a heated rusty butter knife, and no, she won't take it off with just one quick slash, she'll use handsaw motion. But that is depending on the women, mind you. He glanced out his window and over Kohono. Those two were now being searched for frantically by the other clans. Hell, even the Uchihas helped look, still being the stuck-up bastards that they truly are through the whole thing. He felt horrible at the thought of what was going to happen after this. He knew that somehow people were going to blame this on Naruto, one way or another. The Hokage snapped out of high thoughts when he felt a large surge of energy coming from the forest. He looked in the direction of the power source to see a huge light coming from the forest. The third remembered where he felt this energy, and he knew that something, beyond what he had originally thought, was wrong. Just then, a man bursted through the door, panting and gasping for breath. The Hokage turned to face him. Report. Order the third, as the man looked up at him. We've found them. The Cloud Nin couldn't believe what he was seeing, what he was feeling. A child have this much power would be impossible, but here he was, releasing enough chakra to match Junin level. He looked downwards towards his pants. Yep, he defiantly pissed them. He continued to watch, as the light faded, reveling the boy. He no longer wore a orange hoodie and pants. Oh hell no, he was wearing something completely different. He wore, from bottom to top, black boots and black pants. He wore a blood-red long-sleeved jacket, with a high collar, higher than Shino's, that was made to expose his mouth, showing white bandages, which were wrapped around the child's mouth. Think how Zabuza wears them around his. Closing parenthesis dot. The jacket had a zipper. The zipper started at top and goes downward, which was zipped halfway down his chest, exposing a dark red shirt. The jacket was big on the child and moved in the light breeze going by. The Cloud Nin wasn't even able to see the child's hands until he lifted them into a taijutsu stance, more advanced than his previous one. His hands were covered from about halfway up his arm to down his hands in pitch-black bandages, the tips of his fingers being exposed, which were covered with seals and letters that glowed a dark purple. All the letters were from a different language that he couldn't understand. He looked up at the child's face. Not only was his blonde hair now blood red, but his eyes had also turned red and were covered with veins. His pupils had split, giving him 2 pupils for each eye instead of 1, and were slit, like a fox's. The most noticeable part, however, was the dark red fox ears now on his head and the single fox tail behind him. The child looked directly into the Cloud Nin's eyes, striking fear within him. A second later, speaking in a thunderous voice that could make any man bow before him. "It's time to finish this," stated Naruto, as he charged forward. Now I could be a total bastard and stop the chapter at this point, but then again, you'd miss a really kick-ass battle, especially since some very interesting things are about to happen. So, I'll continue the battle that was meant for next chapter, well, some of it. And delivered a punch to the gut, sending the Cloud Nin upwards. Naruto jumped upwards towards the Cloud Nin and delivered a kick to his head, sending him towards the ground, while forming 3 seals. Inferno Jujika, Naruto yelled, as he shot a huge stream of fire toward the Cloud Nin, erupting into 4 fiery explosions when it landed. The Cloud Nin was still in shock, as he hid behind a tree, just barely doing a kawarimi in time. He was barely able to keep up with the child, he couldn't even see him move. He started to act frantically, forming some seals as quickly as possible and threw a wave of ring shuriken at Naruto. Naruto just stood there, as the shuriken continued towards him. At the last moment he spun around to face the shuriken and had his hands preform a seal, creating a wall of fire to appear before him, stopping the shuriken. The Cloud Nin rushed behind Naruto and tried to slash him with his katana, but Naruto, amazingly caught the blade with his hand, as the katana melted for reasons unknown to the Cloud Nin. Naruto then jumped backwards into the air and after reaching a certain height, he somehow was able to shoot flame from his feet as he did a kicking motion sending him straight down towards the Cloud Nin. The Cloud Nin avoided Naruto, as he tried to hit the Cloud Nin and instead hitting the ground, creating a small crater. Naruto made a seal and did a sweeping motion with his hand, throwing fireballs like he would throw shuriken, as he yelled. Fei Amari. The Cloud Nin retaliated with his ring shurikens, canceling the fireballs. Naruto did 3 more seals, as he reached both of his hands backwards. Think how Goku does it in Dragon Ball Z and you'll have the right idea. His tail then moved towards his hands, detaching from his body and curling into a ball. Naruto did some swirling motions, as the ball started to not only spin rapidly, but turned into a fireball. He threw it at the Cloud Nin as he yelled, "Kitsune Supirito." The Cloud Nin managed to dodge it while jumping to another tree, only to watch it come back towards him. He continued to dodge the fireball while forming some seals and making his giant ring shuriken once again. He spun around in mid-air and pushed the shuriken into the fireball. The two just pushed against each other for a few seconds, trying to overpower one another, before erupting into a huge explosion, sending him backwards towards the ground. Just as the Cloud Nin stood up, Naruto struck him with a kunai. He showed a surprise expression when the Cloud Nin was replaced with a log. Naruto soon felt pain in his body, as the Cloud Nin started to bounce off the trees and strike him when he passed by like last time. After a few moments of this, Naruto gathered energy into his body and released it with a ear-shattering scream. While a flaming barrier shot outwards, ripping the ground apart, as it grew in size. The Cloud Nin managed to escape with his life, as he now stood at the opposite side of the battlefield. He watched as Naruto just laughed for a few moments, before reaching under his coat. "What the hell are you doing?" asked the Cloud Nin, as he watched Naruto laugh some more. "Just calling on a friend," Naruto stated, as he started to perform a series of hand seals. "Kuchio's no jutsu," Naruto yelled, as he slammed his hand on the ground, causing the battlefield to be covered by a blast of smoke. "You summoned me, Sarutobi?" asked the white ape, as he looked downwards. The Hokage is short, so of course he looked downwards. On to see a human child, he did not recognize the clothing, but his smell. "Naruto, what is this?" asked the white ape. "I don't have time to explain, Emna. Just please, help me in this fight." Emna raised an eyebrow, as he looked over at the Cloud Nin, who was preparing to attack. Emna sighed, as he nodded. For now, At last. Emna replied, as he started to form some seals. Henge. He yelled. As he took the shape of a staff, Naruto showed a confused expression. If you could tell, probably not. I can't use staffs. Naruto stated. Just grab onto the staff and I'll do all the maneuvering. Naruto slowly nodded, as he took the staff and got into a battle stance. The Cloud Nin could only think of one thing, as he watched Naruto. I'm going to die.